You've spent thousands on gear, stockpiled enough food to last a year, trained yourself in fire starting and water purification, maybe even built a bunker or reinforced your home. You've got the checklist memorized, the bug-out bag packed, the evacuation routes planned down to the minute. But here's the hard truth that might save your life when everything else fails. There's one survival rule that almost every prepper overlooks, and it's not about what you have, it's about who you are when the plan falls apart. If you're serious about surviving what's coming, subscribe now, because what I'm about to share will challenge everything you think you know about preparedness. Like this video if you want the raw truth, not the comfortable lies. The rule is simple but brutal. Rigidity kills, adaptability saves. 90% of preppers are so locked into their plans, their checklists, their gear, and their routines that when reality hits and nothing goes according to script, they freeze, they panic, or worse, they keep following a plan that's already failed. Let me be crystal clear about this. Your plan will fail. Not might fail, will fail. The scenario you prepared for won't be the scenario you face. The gear you counted on will break, get lost, or turn out to be useless for the actual situation. The route you memorized will be blocked. The safe location you scouted will be compromised. The timeline you calculated will be meaningless. And when that happens, the prepper who survives isn't the one with the most expensive equipment or the longest supply list. It's the one who can think, adapt, and improvise under pressure. This isn't speculation or dramatic storytelling. This is documented reality from every major disaster, conflict, and collapse in modern history. During Hurricane Katrina, thousands of people had evacuation plans that became worthless when the roads flooded hours before the official evacuation order. The survivors weren't the ones who kept trying to follow their original plan. They were the ones who immediately pivoted, found alternative routes, used boats, broke into buildings for shelter, and made decisions based on the reality in front of them, not the plan in their head. In the Bosnian War, preppers who had stockpiled supplies in their homes watched helplessly as their neighborhoods became war zones and their carefully prepared supplies became targets. The ones who survived were those who could abandon their plans, leave their stockpiles, blend in with refugees, trade what they had for what they needed in the moment, and constantly adapt to shifting power dynamics and danger zones. Here's what most preppers do wrong. They create detailed plans and then fall in love with those plans. They invest so much time, money, and mental energy into preparing for specific scenarios that they develop tunnel vision. They prepare for an EMP attack but not a pandemic. They prepare for economic collapse but not civil unrest. They prepare for nuclear war but not climate disasters. And even worse, they prepare their response down to the smallest detail, creating rigid protocols that assume everything will unfold in a predictable sequence. They tell themselves, if this happens, I'll do that. If the grid goes down, I'll bug out to location X using route Y, arriving in Z hours. If there's a food shortage, I'll rely on my stockpile for exactly 18 months. This kind of thinking is dangerous because it trains your brain to follow scripts instead of assess reality. The military understands this better than anyone. There's a famous saying, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Military strategists spend enormous resources on planning, but they also train extensively on adaptability, decision-making under uncertainty, and rapid response to changing conditions. They run scenarios where the plan falls apart specifically to train soldiers to think and adapt. Yet civilian preppers often do the opposite. They create one plan, maybe two, and then mentally rehearse that same plan over and over until it becomes gospel. When reality deviates from the script, they don't have the mental flexibility to pivot. Let's talk about what adaptability actually means in survival contexts, because it's not just about being flexible or going with the flow. Real adaptability is a specific set of skills and mental habits that you can develop through deliberate practice. First, it's about information gathering and situational awareness. Adaptable survivors are constantly scanning their environment, asking questions, gathering intelligence, and updating their mental model of what's happening. They don't assume they know what's going on. They verify, they observe, they listen. During the fall of Saigon, the people who escaped weren't the ones who assumed everything would be fine or stuck to their normal routines. They were the ones paying attention to subtle signs, hearing rumors from multiple sources, watching troop movements, and making decisions based on incomplete but current information. Second, adaptability requires emotional regulation under stress. When your plan fails, when the unexpected happens, when you lose something critical, your first reaction will be emotional. Fear, anger, frustration, denial. These emotions are natural, but they're also survival killers if you can't manage them. Adaptable survivors have trained themselves to notice their emotional state, acknowledge it, and then make decisions based on logic and current reality, not emotion. This isn't about being emotionless or cold. It's about not letting panic or anger hijack your decision-making. There are documented cases from ship sinkings where people who remained emotionally regulated had dramatically higher survival rates than those who panicked, even when they had similar access to life-saving equipment. Third, adaptability means creative problem-solving and improvisation. When you don't have the right tool, the right resource, or the right plan, can you figure out an alternative? Can you use what you have in ways you didn't plan for? In survival situations, the most valuable asset isn't the perfect gear. It's the ability to see potential solutions that aren't obvious. During the Apollo 13 disaster, NASA engineers had to figure out how to adapt a square carbon dioxide filter to fit into a round receptacle using only the materials available on the spacecraft. That's adaptability under life or death pressure. In wilderness survival, indigenous peoples and experienced outdoorsmen survive not because they have the best gear, but because they can see survival resources everywhere. They can identify dozens of edible plants, make cordage from tree bark, create shelter from branches and debris, and navigate by stars and landmarks. That's learned adaptability. Fourth, adaptability requires letting go of sunk costs. This is psychologically brutal but critical. When you've invested heavily in a plan, a location, a stockpile, or a strategy, your brain will resist abandoning it even when it's clearly not working. This is called the sunk cost fallacy, and it kills people. The prepper who refuses to leave their carefully prepared homestead because they've invested 5 years and $50,000 will die when that location becomes untenable. The prepper who keeps following their evacuation plan even after the route is blocked will waste critical time and resources. Adaptable survivors can emotionally detach from their investments and make cold calculations about what serves survival now, not what served their plan yesterday. Fifth, adaptability means building diverse skills instead of specialized dependencies. If your entire survival strategy depends on one location, one skill set, or one type of scenario, you're brittle. When that assumption breaks, you break. But if you've developed a broad range of skills, knowledge across multiple domains, and the ability to learn quickly in new situations, you're resilient. The difference between brittle and resilient is whether you break or bend under pressure. A prepper who only knows how to use their specific gear, who can only survive in their planned location, who has only prepared for one type of collapse, that's brittleness. A prepper who has basic medical knowledge, mechanical skills, foraging ability, conflict de-escalation training, physical fitness, navigation skills, and social intelligence, that's resilience. Now let's get practical, because understanding the concept isn't enough. How do you actually develop adaptability? First, train yourself in realistic scenarios where things go wrong. Most preppers practice their skills under ideal conditions. They start fires on dry days with good kindling. They practice navigation on clear days with charged GPS devices as backup. They cook their stored food in comfortable kitchens. That's not training, that's rehearsal. Real training means deliberately making things difficult. Start a fire in the rain with damp wood. Navigate at night without GPS. Try to purify questionable water sources. Force yourself to solve problems without your primary tools. Every time you practice a skill, introduce a complication. This trains your brain to problem solve under adversity, instead of just following memorized steps. Second, study historical disasters and survival stories from multiple perspectives. Read survivor accounts from wars, famines, natural disasters, economic collapses, and societal breakdowns. Pay attention to what actually worked versus what people planned. Notice the patterns. The survivors who made it often did things that seemed irrational or against standard prepper advice, but they were adapting to their specific reality. In the Warsaw Ghetto, survival strategies included things that would never appear in a prepper manual, like deliberately infecting yourself with mild typhus to gain immunity, creating secret passages between buildings, and developing intricate barter networks based on cigarettes and bread. These weren't planned responses. They were adaptations to an unimaginable situation. Third, practice rapid decision-making and scenario analysis. Set a timer and give yourself complex scenarios where you have to make survival decisions with incomplete information and time pressure. Force yourself to choose a course of action, explain your reasoning, and then identify what additional information would change your decision. This builds the neural pathways for decision-making under stress. The military uses decision-forcing scenarios extensively because they work. Your brain gets better at whatever you practice, so if you only practice following plans, that's what you'll do under stress. If you practice making decisions when plans fail, that's what you'll do when it matters. Fourth, build physical and mental resilience through regular discomfort. Adaptability isn't just mental, it's also about your body and mind's ability to function under stress, deprivation, and discomfort. If you've never been genuinely hungry, exhausted, cold, or pushed to your physical limits, you don't know how you'll respond when survival demands it. Regular exposure to controlled discomfort, whether through fasting, cold exposure, intense physical training, or sleep deprivation, builds your tolerance and teaches you that you can function when things aren't comfortable. This isn't about machismo or toughness for its own sake. It's about knowing from experience that you won't collapse when conditions deteriorate. Fifth, develop people skills and social intelligence. Most lone wolf preppers fundamentally misunderstand survival. Humans are social animals. We survived and thrived as a species because we cooperate, share information, and form communities. In almost every real collapse scenario, your survival will depend at least partly on your ability to navigate social dynamics. Build alliances, negotiate, read people's intentions, and avoid or de-escalate conflicts. If your entire survival strategy assumes you'll be isolated and self-sufficient, you're planning for a fantasy, not reality. Adaptability includes the ability to work with people you didn't choose, trust when necessary, deceive when survival demands it, and make hard social calculations about who helps you and who endangers you. Here's something most preppers won't admit. Gear is seductive because it makes you feel prepared without requiring you to change who you are. Buying a water filter feels like progress. Stockpiling food feels like security. Installing solar panels feels like independence. And all of these things have value, but they're also comfortable because they don't challenge you psychologically. Developing true adaptability is uncomfortable because it means confronting your mental rigidity. Practicing failure, acknowledging that you can't control everything, and accepting that your carefully constructed plans might become worthless. That's why 90% of preppers avoid this work. It's easier to buy another piece of gear than to fundamentally change how your mind works under pressure. The brutal reality is that when major disruptions happen, whether it's war, collapse, pandemic, climate disasters, or economic meltdown, the people who survive won't be the ones with the most stuff. They'll be the ones who can read the situation accurately, make hard decisions quickly, improvise solutions with limited resources, manage their fear and stress, learn new skills rapidly, build and leverage social connections, and most importantly, abandon plans that aren't working and create new ones in real time. That's what separates survivors from casualties. Not gear, not stockpiles, not locations, but adaptability. So ask yourself honestly, if your primary plan failed right now, how fast could you pivot? If you had to leave your stockpile behind, what would you actually know how to do? If your planned safe location became a target, where would you go and how would you decide? If your bug-out route was blocked, what's your decision-making process for choosing an alternative? If you lost your primary tools and gear, could you improvise solutions? If the disaster you face is completely different from the one you prepared for, can your mind shift gears or will it freeze? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're the real test of whether you're actually prepared or just performing preparation. The good news is that adaptability can be trained, but it requires consistent, deliberate effort. It requires humbling yourself to realize that no matter how much you've prepared, you're still going to face situations you didn't anticipate. It requires practicing failure so that when real failure happens, you know how to respond. It requires building a broad base of knowledge and skills instead of specializing in one scenario. And it requires honest self-assessment about your mental flexibility and emotional regulation under pressure. Don't just watch this video and nod along. Take action. This week, practice a survival skill under deliberately difficult conditions. Study one historical disaster from the survivor's perspective. Practice making a difficult decision with incomplete information and a time limit. Push yourself physically or mentally beyond your comfort zone in a controlled way. Test your own assumptions by asking what would happen if your main plan failed. And if you want to go deeper, you'll find in the pinned comment some guides and documents that can take your preparedness to the next level. Check them out when you're ready. The preppers who survive what's coming won't be the ones with the biggest stockpiles or the most expensive gear. They'll be the ones who trained their minds to adapt when everything goes wrong. Subscribe if you understand that real survival isn't about following a plan. It's about becoming someone who can thrive when all plans fail. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Comment with your own experiences adapting under pressure. And remember that every minute you spend developing mental flexibility is worth more than another piece of gear you'll probably never use. The world is becoming more unpredictable, more chaotic, and more dangerous. The survivors will be the adapters. Make sure you're one of them.